See, I got it right. Well, I got it right the second time. Hi, everybody. It's Brian. It's Breaking Down Security, BreakSec Education. If you're here on Tuesdays and you're normally with me, I would be doing some boot.dev. We'd be doing some, threat intelligence news. We'd be talking about the latest breach or whatever. But I have something a little special today. Normally we've done interviews before, but I'm really glad that Jay's able to join us today. Jay, welcome. Hey, how you doing, sir? Oh, oh,
wave so many people are going through.
okay, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about 75 degrees down here in San Diego right now, so we're really enjoying the good times and the good weather of summer as well. So, um, cool. Well, uh, I almost feel like that this is about a yearly event that we do with you because it's such excellent training and it's such an excellent piece of technology that I'm constantly in awe about things like by Kubernetes. But um, for those of you who for those folks who don't know who you are, maybe we could give a little background on who Jay Beale is and what he does for a living.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So at work, I'm a security consultant and leadership at InGuardians, where I'm the CEO and the CTO. I'm still the CTO because when they asked me to be the CEO, I was like, wait, people are going to think I'm not technical anymore. So that's what I do for work. I work with a bunch of um, cool, smart people who want to, who for the, like the bulk of what we do is, red teaming and pen testing, but we honestly do a lot of work to try to help people have stronger network security programs, applications, all of it. And so we get to every now and then be a consultant and actually try to help solve problems, not just point out, just point them out, uh, which is really fun. So I got involved in information security back when we called it computer security a long time ago.
Yep.
I made an open source tool with a bunch of other people called Bastille Linux, which was a Linux hardening tool back when your Linux distribution like would install and it would be, listening on, 20 different ports and running all kinds of software and you'd hear a lot more about worms and so we did Bastille Linux for a long time, but at a certain point, the Linux distributions got really good and it wasn't needed. So I've done like I guess um, in terms of other stuff I do in our field and our industry. I'm really into Kubernetes, and partly that just stems from having been a Linux guy for a long time. So um, one of the cool things about Kubernetes is it's a way of orchestrating containers, and containers, at least Linux containers, are, kind of come straight, like in so many ways, come straight out of what you think of almost as Linux security hardening features.
Right.
And
Right.
and so it's been a really natural thing. So I teach a class at Black Hat and some other conferences on attacking and defending Kubernetes. And I helped create and I co-lead the Kubernetes CTF, capture the flag at DEF CON,
Hmm.
which I'm really eager to talk about today.
Right.
And I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really useful to share. I think the main thing is I've loved information security for a long time because I like you always get to learn something new and you have to. Like it's kind of great. Like I was when I like went back into computers, I was in grad school, was studying to be a math professor. Um and somebody was trying to convince me somebody was trying to convince me to come and be a system administrator at a college. And I was like, yeah, but I'm in math. They're like, what you're doing when you're goofing off at night in grad school with this whole Linux network you've built up and you're serving your own email and all this, like that's my job. Like you could just do that. And like, there's no way you could get paid to just play with computers all day. Like play
Right.
with is a little bit of a straw of a exaggeration, but
Right. Right.
he's like, no. And I'm like, well, I don't know. The biggest thing for me is would I get to keep learning? And he'd be like,
Ah,
get to, you have to.
right.
And this is back when we had tech books, in paper format, right? He said like, actually, we get a book budget. And I was like, a book budget.
Well, for a
Oh,
college
I'm
student,
in. I
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. Oh, dude, I was poorer than a college student. I was a grad student.
Oh, well, there you go.
It was yeah, it's but yeah. So I was just like, oh my God, okay, and I ended up in information security really, really quickly after that. But yeah. But anyway, I love our field, and nowadays I really like to help other people who are just getting into it, or just getting their feet underneath them. Um, uh, Honestly, part of that for me is like kind of talking to everybody about like just I feel like the first few years of our field is can be really tough, and a big part of really tough is you're always worried you don't know enough. And so one of the big things for me to isn't just to do training. Sure, that can help solve the problem of not knowing enough, but also to
Right.
help everyone understand that like we're all going through that. Like it doesn't matter, how much, take anybody who you look at who knows 10 times as much as me in your mind. And and I'll tell you first, they know 100 times as much as me. Um, but um, but also, they don't know everything the same way you don't either. It's just they're used to the idea, like they're not scared of it anymore. Like they
Right.
just know like that's part of our field. We just keep learning
Yep.
and learning, and then helping each other out. So
Yep. No,
yeah,
that's
sorry if that was a bit of a ramble.
no, that's great. Maybe this is actually I actually have a number. I had like a number 8 in my head, but that I haven't put on the list here. My you were talking about constantly learning, and you're constantly learning. You're constantly learning things like Kubernetes, and I think the biggest thing since in the last 5 years has probably been the rise of AI, and everybody's learning that. And if you're not learning it, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, I think. Um, you are the head of InGuardians. You have been for a while. I've known you and met you at various conferences over the years, and what have you. Y'all are constantly innovating and what have you. And this is not an advertisement for InGuardians. They didn't pay me to say any of this
Sure.
stuff. It's just y'all have quality people there. We've interviewed several of them many times on the show here. Um, how has AI affected the engagement process and the consulting process and the pen test process for your organization? We will definitely talk about the Kubernetes stuff and the training and all of that, but
No, no, no. That's I'm
having
happy to talk
come
about anything you want.
oh,
Like
I appreciate that.
yeah,
But having come from you and I talked about Leviathan. We were at not competing places, but there was other places in Seattle, and we would do engagements, and we got to the point where we were writing reports before AI, where it was like, how many times can you tell somebody what an XSS is or what an IDOR is? Every time you go to an engagement, there's XSS, there's IDOR, there's API problems, there's these things, and it's like, how many times can you write the same report over and over again, or the same findings? Hey, you've got request issues here. You've got GraphQL problems in this thing, and it's like, how many times are you going to write the same thing over and over again? And it was like, I don't want to call it canned responses because, like I said, that's kind of a negative thing. But it's like you need to have some standardized language to say that, and AI I think has made it easier for reports to be generated. There's prompts out there from groups on how to write a proper report or to write up a CVE for folks. How is InGuardians leveraging or using AI in this case to do things like make the tedious stuff less tedious, or to remove that kind of work? Is that something that you're engaging with?
yeah. I mean, I'd say that um, so first, I'd say we're not using AI a ton right now, and that is it's a strange thing to say because in some room in every company somebody's talking um, at least somewhat realistically um, about what work they can do, about about how they can enhance the work the company's doing with AI, or how they can replace some of their labor with AI or so on. And I don't know, I'm not jumping on the bandwagon to replace people with AI. But but there's certainly places I think where we're using it, but we're doing that in a pretty small and contained way. And honestly, for us, that's been about privacy. It's been
Right.
about not feeding things to public models.
Right. Right.
Um, like as much as as much as companies that are running models for you will, have promised in many cases, like if you pay for this tier of service or what have you, then you can keep your data from ever being commingled with anybody else's.
Right.
And we won't train on that data or what have you. I think I'm not necessarily sold on that. So what I can tell you is, as an example in consulting practice, what a few of us have done, and we haven't systematized this across the company in any way, is we're on Macs. We're on, mostly on it, I guess entirely on these M chip Macs that are, that run models really nicely. And so, you know, I might run Llama 3,
Right.
or I'll run a Llama 3 version on the Mac I'm working on. I'll say, like, um, give me an example of that finding. Like, I want to describe this, but I'll run it locally because I sure as hell don't want to leak anything out.
Exactly.
And so it'll help me write a finding. I think the weird thing is that for the canned part of a finding, that was already a solved problem at our company and lots of other companies. You have verbiage. And hell, even when the company doesn't do it like wide, Brian, if you wrote up cross-site scripting, or if you wrote up IDOR, by the way, IDOR is my favorite app on my board of all time because it never goes away. It's just this idea.
Yes, exactly.
It's just this idea that you're like, hey, I log in, it shows me my records, and I look at my records, and each of my records has like, I look at the link for my record, and it's like, link, blah, 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 100. And then the next one's
Right.
link, blah, 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 110. And you're like, huh, what happened if instead of clicking 100, I just entered 101 instead?
Right.
And all of a sudden you get somebody else's record you were never supposed to have, but nothing's checking to make sure that you shouldn't get it. And that number is also super predictable. It's like IDOR, I swear, will never go away.
Nope.
Um, it is as a pen tester, you gotta love it. Um, but yeah, no, like, so you don't end up writing up IDOR or cross-site scripting. I mean, by the same token, in my mind, if a report, like if the finding in a report doesn't in any way reflect the customer themselves, like what's this app for? What is, like, how does it relate to their business? How does it relate to what they do? How does it relate to the kind of risks they have? And I don't just mean like regulation compliance, but like, stop and think what would happen if somebody could do this to this system.
Right.
Would that be a really big deal, or would it be really tiny? And sometimes it's like, it's really tiny. Don't spend all your time elevating the hell out of this, CVSS score of 9.8 or whatever,
Yep.
um, when it's in something, when it's not useful when it's not as directly useful as something else might be. Take something like, as an attacker, you're going to chain together things. You're going to find something fairly small in this thing over here that's really, really vital, and then privilege escalation, and then lateral movement, and so on. And you're like, okay, this is the whole shooting match.
Right.
But in terms of AI, yeah. So first, report writing can be really helpful. I think one of the places that I've found AI really nice sometimes is, hey AI, like, quickly, can you give me some code that takes in this JSON, this
Mm.
bunch of JSON, and outputs a JSON object like that looks like this, but do the following. And then I take that code and I edit it, I test it, and then I can run it. I think that's been really helpful. I know that there's all kinds of possibility, and gosh, every now and then I get scared when a customer, I talk to a customer like, so like, could we just use AI instead of you all to do all of our pen testing? I'm like, okay, wow, I don't think so, not yet.
Right.
And if we get there, then I guess we'll need to pivot and start testing making sure that we're testing the tester. It sounds
Yeah.
like a smaller. I hope there's still enough work. I don't know. But yeah. So I
Yeah.
think that yeah, it's, um, yeah. I'd like to say, um, I'll say this. I have a lot to learn when it comes to, when you start to do the composing agents and composing multiple agents into a system and so on.
Yeah.
I haven't dug into that.
That,
Um,
yep.
and this is one of those places that I'm like really comfortable saying, like, okay, I haven't dug into that yet. Um, when I want to, when I choose to, when I need to, I will learn that, and I'll learn it, and I'll learn it fast, I'll learn it well, and that's basically I think what most of our job is. Or,
That
sorry, that's a big part of what our job is.
that's cool. Yeah.
That's
No,
big.
I still think that there's a need to have that manual process. There's um, I think Mr. Betcher, Miss Berlin, and I were talking, in the last in our last stream, we were talking about the lack of junior positions, and a junior pen tester. I haven't seen one of those in for a good while now, and it's like, is AI taking over the junior positions? Is it, are they the ones? Is the AI the one doing the port scans? Is it AI doing the tedious tasks that allows people to go and do things? And I could see that as like a force multiplier. Like, hey, we could scan this API all day and look for the endpoints that they didn't tell us about or something like that. But hey, we could just have the AI do it real quick for us. And then I can be over here doing this thing. And, you know, I've been on time box things where it's a 2 week thing. And it's like, hey, if we had an AI that was automatically doing this scan for us or looking through these things for us, I can go over here and do so much more and find so many other new and interesting things instead of being the person that's got to go scan, scan, that kind of thing. Um,
Sure.
but I completely, scan but verify, write code but
Yeah,
verify. Those things are still going to be, I think, items that we're going to have to deal with AI. Meanwhile, there are AI tools out there that you can do red teaming with, and not sure how good those are yet. But maybe we'll have,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure that if they'll get to some level of pen testing, but not red teaming,
right,
to
right,
the extent that our field right now makes a distinction. Um, I think, when I think about it also, um, there are a few areas that I think AI will have more trouble displacing us or what have you. Like one would be stealth, the
mm,
situation where you say
yep,
I'd like to see what a stealthy attacker could do.
yep,
Like the distinction often in red team pen tests is to emulate a true attacker and try to not get caught and allow the organization to kind of build their ability to detect.
right,
Um,
right,
and I think the other really related way is like the purple teaming idea, where you're
mm,
doing a pen test, where you're pen testing, but showing, you're also kind of showing the client how do they detect what they couldn't detect before, and
right,
like literally, like first build their detection, second build their ability to like build their controls so you can't get where you're getting, third make it so that they can in real time figure out how to knock you off their network and then keep you knocked off their network. And that is so teaching focused that it's an area I think that, again, where I don't worry that much about there being about being market confusion between what humans can do and what AI thingies can do.
yeah.
Um, like there's yeah, I think I'm right with you on the force multiplier on the like, okay, how do I make myself more effective? How do I make myself more productive?
Right.
Um, I think that part's been proving itself out that these tools can be really helpful.
Yep. Yeah, and there's
Yeah,
there's there's fuzzing harnesses was another thing I was thinking of. If it can, maybe make a rudimentary fuzzing, capability for you so that you're not having to build the fuzzing harness for you every time. Some of those can get very bespoke. When I worked at Leviathan, our good friend Chicken would be on an engagement. He's like, "Yeah, I got to spend X number of hours writing a fuzzing harness." And we're like, "Oh, well, that's a deliverable we can give to them, or that's additional value that they're
yeah,
going to get down the road, or whatever, because they can fuzz their own APIs at this point." And hopefully, with the right query, you can actually have the AI do that for you. But again, privacy issues, right? You don't want it.
yeah.
It should be running local. Those kinds of issues. Matter of fact, I've also been talking with our good friend Mick Douglas, who is working on Concierge. He was running guidance. He was on the guidance for the SANS AI security process. So hopefully in the
Yeah,
next couple of weeks we'll have him on to talk about some of that as well. I was very interested in that, and of course
he's so awesome.
he's good people, yeah. But yeah, so we're yeah. There's I think I feel like that this technology isn't like blockchain. I think it's probably akin to when everybody was deciding whether or not they want to stay on prem or move to the cloud. It's in that same kind of paradigm. It's like, oh,
Sure,
I'm afraid of the cloud. I don't want to be in the cloud. That's somebody else's computer. You know, you got the pictures with, you know, the cloud is somebody else's computer. You know, and it's a big
sure.
sign of China. I think this is the same type of shift in way of doing business or way of working in this case, where everything is now not in your control, and
Yeah,
it's not in a nice cabinet in the bathroom somewhere where you know it's there wherever
yeah,
there is, right? And that's, you
yeah.
know, it's that control, it's the giving up that control, and we're going to find better ways to adapt and pivot on these things. But I feel that this technology is very much akin to that, not like the blockchain stuff, but it's very much like that.
Well, I think that's a good metaphor because even even cloud has had a like with all these things, you have the like, no, I'm afraid of cloud, I'm afraid of cloud, I'm afraid of cloud. Then you go to the like, okay, we're moving everything to cloud.
Right,
Then it's the like, oh my God, the costs have gotten insane. We're moving some of it back.
right, right,
And then you even have things like the public cloud providers going and saying, hey, wait a second, we can offer you, we can offer you some of what we're doing in public cloud on-prem, and we can even hybrid. We can even
oh
hybridize
yeah,
it. We can have, like you can have your uh, you can have clusters of compute that are in multi-cloud and are even on-prem and that are
right,
run by your API in cloud.
right, yeah,
So I mean, I think that's yeah, I think the kind of cool thing is the story is never as simple as we think.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
so
Yeah, and you know, going back to your training for Kubernetes, you know, some of that is going to be, you know, hey, we're putting everything in the cloud, and then Kubernetes came along and said, hey, we can probably still run a good number of our stuff locally here. So I'm trying to make a segue here. So
sure,
uh,
absolutely, it's a good one. I'll take it.
um, so if so my first question that I had on here, Kubernetes versus Docker versus LSC versus vSphere versus VMs, what makes why Kubernetes? Why'd you pick Kubernetes when you were doing this? Is it just this was the first technology you learned, or you know it was the best one at the time, and you know why Kubernetes over the other one?
I think that's a good question. So so LXC was something that came out, I think, before Docker. It's a container runtime. Um, and um, and similar to like Google had let me contain that for you,
Right,
where they weren't quite doing the exact same thing as containers because I think they were using the control group stuff, but not the namespaces. Um, but uh, honestly, so I was playing around with LXC and I was playing around with Docker, and I got really excited about those, to be honest. Um, just because that was really neat as a Linux guy,
right,
or as a Linux person. Um, the I think Kubernetes, I think honestly, as far as Kubernetes goes, like I got swept up in the wave, man. It was quite a while back. I think Kubernetes was at the time was 5 years old. Um, um, but I found it. I'm like, this is really cool. Like Docker was already this, like Docker did the Docker folks did such an amazing job of making Linux containers something that was easy to learn, easy to understand, like much easier to learn, much easier to understand, and much easier, or I don't know if understand. Let's say to understand at a using level, not necessarily at the like, well, wait, what's really going on here? But they
right,
made it like they did that. They got folks to adopt it as a way of shipping software. They got people to start understanding that it was a way to get um, a lot more density of like compute jobs onto the servers. To have servers that weren't anywhere near, like virtual machines were already one way of saying, okay, you've got that machine over there and it's 75% idle. Are you sure that you need
right,
this many machines? So then we're like, okay, let's do virtual machines. And virtual machines, I kind of have a story I tell in my class, where I try and explain what a container actually is, because a container is not really a VM. It's basically, it's kind of the kernel, the Linux kernel, giving some of the programs on a system a different view of the system
Hmm.
than the other programs on the system,
Right.
in a way that starts to feel a little bit like a lightweight virtual machine.
Right.
But anyway, when I kind of go through that story, um, I talk about it from a bit of a density perspective of like somebody saying, like imagine someone operating a platform as a service provider. Like I'm going to take your program, I'm going to stick it on my server, same servers running lots of other people's. If I'm doing that with VMs, if I have like 16 cores, then maybe I run 32 programs or something like that. I give
Mm.
everybody give like give everybody one thread in a core. Um, and the amount of RAM that takes, it's like if I've got it's a whole bunch
It's a
because
lot.
I'm running a
Yeah.
whole lot of operating system there.
Right.
Whereas containers mean that what I can do is I can say, wait, okay, just gonna have one kernel on the system, and I'm gonna have one copy of all these different daemons that need to run. And then all of those will be shared by all these different containers, by all these different people. So I get a lot more than what was the number I gave? 32 for
32.
16 core system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can get a lot more than 32. I could probably get a lot more than 64. I'm still gonna have that point where it's like how how much RAM do I have? How much do I need? But I can actually make much more efficient use of that hardware, um that's been really compelling. Like when we're just doing that with one system, you're good, that's Docker, or that's another container runtime. Um, but when you say, okay, now I've got 40 systems, and I've got 40 very, very beefy servers. I've got a whole bunch of people who want to run programs, and in like some way of getting the programs, of getting a given program with a given need for a certain amount of CPU and RAM and all that. Um, to land on the right one of those machines, and how I'd like to make it fault tolerant so that, if that program crashes, it's okay. I had more copies of the program running, and even other machines that can handle machines falling down. So Kubernetes is just like, it's really, really cool. It was a way of, it's kind of, um, it's interesting. I don't want to get into the philosophy of like, will Kubernetes one day be something like potentially Kubernetes would be something one day that we barely think about because it's just part of plumbing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but that's like a longer and less interesting conversation in my mind. But Kubernetes has been more than, like I've kind of said. So first, it's been a way of like getting a bunch of machines running Docker and orchestrating them and having it so you could say, I've got some workload, I just need it to run
Right.
somewhere. I need to not go down, I need to be reachable. And hell, I've actually broken my program up into a whole bunch of programs, and I need all those programs to be able to find each other, and all of them to scale, like to scale horizontally or scale vertically now too. Um, um, but you get more than that. You start being like, okay, well, now we can orchestrate storage. Now we can orchestrate, use of video cards and so on and so on. Like it starts, um, yeah, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's just delivered on the promise that public cloud providers are often delivering on, like saying, listen, we're going to make it so you can just get your stuff running here, and we'll make it so it doesn't need anywhere near as much human intervention, and you'll be able to do more things. Um, um, yeah, it's neat. I don't know. I found it
That's
really cool. I found it really cool from a security perspective. Like it's really it's an interesting pen test target because it's like,
right.
okay, what if I told you we had a fully software-defined data center, and in that data center, like by default, every single thing running in the data center can actually reach out and talk to the control plane, and you're like, that sounds a little sketchy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know we've never done that before, but that's what this is. But by default, right? We can
Right.
do. But it's it's more interesting as an attacker. So yeah.
That's cool.
Again, an incredibly long-winded answer. I'm so
No, no,
sorry
no, no,
you're
no. That's
slamming right
fine.
into my AD. But
I love it. That was excellent. So you are giving training at Black Hat, and then there is a CTF at Black Hat and a CTF at DEF CON, right? Yes.
um uh training at Black Hat, CTF at DEF CON.
Okay.
There are other people do trainings at DEF CON. Um, so you should, there are workshops, and I don't really follow them so much,
Right.
but yeah, training at Black Hat, but at DEF CON, I'll be with the team doing a Kubernetes CTF. And we've been doing it
Okay.
for a while. Um, but we're really trying to get the word out more about it. Yeah, I can tell you about it if you'd like.
Right. So the CTF at DEF CON, where are you going to be at? Are you going to be in like Red Team Village or Blue Team Village? Or are you going to be in the pit with everybody near the speaker tracks? Is it a village kind of thing, or do you have your own little space like the DEF CON CTF?
So will similar to the DEF CON CTF, although that thing's much bigger and more established and much
Right.
harder and
Right.
all that, right?
Right.
DEF CON has a whole lot of different contests. And so we'll be in the contest area. We have like a 400 square foot space.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
and this is actually the first year we're doing it in person.
Oh.
We've done it hybrid every year before that. I mean, we've done it online
Right.
every year before this, but this year
Okay.
we're actually gonna we're gonna have we're gonna I think our area is basically 3 tables. So one table will be us, and 2 more tables will be like anybody who kind of shows up and wants help.
Nice.
The
Nice.
the thing about it that I really like, we've been doing this thing with the CTF for a long time that's focused around the idea that there are kind of fewer people who know how to hack Kubernetes versus know how to hack web apps.
Right.
And so what we do with the contest is, I'm going to call it the event, but it's a DEF CON contest. There are lots of DEF CON contests and some really cool ones. Um, is that we have actually we have two things in our event. One is a 1 day competitive CTF, and it's got a ton of flags. You can be part of a team or you can be an individual. There's a leaderboard, and we're really trying hard this year to bring to have something that's both accessible. You can get some flags if you're new,
Hmm.
but also will give the super experienced people a run for their money as they compete with each other.
Nice.
And um, in addition to that contest, though, we also run for all 3 days. The contest is 1 day. For 3 days, we take a previous CTF and we put it up, and we let teams basically have a cluster of their own to attack, and we give them, if they like, we give them like a full cheat sheet. Here's how to get every single flag. Like in essence, here's the written speed run. And the idea of that is to make it so first, people who really are just totally new to Kubernetes and want to experience Kubernetes and experience attacking it, they can basically kind of do some, they can do some, I don't know how to describe it, kind of like some self-taught with some help from us, but some self-taught attack and attack work, and it ends up being really fun, I think, for them. And we run that for all 3 days. Another part of what that does is people can go and play in that on that first day, and they're like, oh, well, maybe I could get some flags. Like it kind of helps them with their, like, if anybody's like feeling like on the fence, like, wait, I don't think, like, we all think we're not lead enough. We all think we're, whatever. And so it's kind of just to, again, kind of just be more welcoming for the contest itself, to like have something before the contest happens where
Right.
people can play with a previous one using a cheat sheet, and just kind of get a little more comfortable with it.
Very cool.
Um, so we're really, yeah, it's been fun. We've themed it on a movie most years. Yeah, different movies. Uh, yeah, I mean, Hackers was obviously one year, and I think
Right.
the Avengers Endgame or the Infinity War was another year. Um, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of different people help create challenges for it, and create flags, building that up, and we're excited, honestly, about we're excited about doing the contest, about doing the event on site this year. Like people can play in the contest, and they can do the competitive event fully online. They don't have to be in person.
Okay.
If they come in person, though, we can kind of help them out on the non-contest one, on the learning one. We can kind of, we
Right.
help them out, give them some, some help, some mentoring, some Q&A. Just it's kind of cool.
That's
We're
kind of
really
nice.
excited about that.
That's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. Um, I think you and I were talking before, though my first DEF CON was last year. I also gooned at that place. So I got to do a bunch
No,
of
cool.
laps. I got to do a bunch of laps in the speaker tracks in that area. The quietest place in the entire spot was the DEF CON CTF. It was like you walk back there and it's like you walk into an anechoic chamber. And it's like there is no sound. And everybody's just leaning over the computers, tap, tap, tap. And you might hear a little clicking or something of the keyboards, but that was it. And it was like, that was the quietest spot in the whole area. And I was like, wow, okay, it's kind of
Wow.
creepy. Um, they want that black badge, you know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally
it,
understand.
yeah. So I want to go back to the training and ask the question. So let's say I'm on the fence. I want to take this training, but I'm like, you know, is this a 100 level course? Is it a 200 level course? Is it a 700 level course? If I'm using sans, notation here, is it what is the, if I don't understand Kubernetes at all, am I going to get lost? Or what is the skill level here? What kind of skills should I have? Should I have a programming language? Should I have, you know, the ability to do various things? What is some of the prerequisites to being able to take this course if I was on the fence trying to decide whether or not I want to do this?
Yeah, sure. So I don't, I'm actually not as familiar with Sans's, 100, 200, 400, 700 levels. Um, in the training class, what we do, like in terms of prerequisites, you don't have to have a programming language or be comfortable programming.
Okay,
You
cool.
don't have to know anything about Kubernetes at all to start, and honestly, you don't have to know anything about containers to start.
So,
But you do have to be comfortable on a Linux command line.
okay,
Um,
okay,
and what that looks like. I mean, in the exercises we do our exercises where there's an option to turn on copy paste. So you can just kind of go through copy pasting there. You'll get stuck in places if you don't understand what you're doing.
right, right,
But we're not gonna, we're not gonna say that you have to understand every command line argument to any command. Like it's
right.
just we'll give you the commands, but you won't understand Linux. We target the class at intermediate to advanced,
Okay,
because by the end you're going really you're going really hardcore.
right, right.
Um, at the beginning, we kind of start out. One of the things we start out with is like, hey, let's actually see what a container truly is. Like, not,
Mm,
I run Docker run or kube control run or create deployment or whatever. Um, but truly, like, hey, let's start a shell and put it in a different kernel namespace. We'll talk about what kernel namespace is. We'll do one by one and basically build a container piece by piece, just using command line tools, no Docker, no container runtime.
okay,
Um,
okay,
and like the whole focus of that is to basically say, okay, you thought you knew, like you thought you knew containers, or you don't think you know containers. Either way, let's see what it actually is, because people are like, well, I can't see inside the container. You're like, if you're on the system, you're not in a container, you actually can see everything.
right, right.
It kind of gets you. So we start there, and we get pretty deep, and we go both attack and defense. So by the time we're done, we've been deploying admission controllers and creating custom rules. And I know I haven't described what an admission controller is. I'm sorry. But we're doing, we're hacking, we're uh, we're figuring out what we can do if you break out of the container, if you create a container that gives you access to the node, to the host the containers are running on.
Right.
Like, what can you do on that host? What can you do to take over the entire cluster from there? What have you? Like, you end up getting, we get really deep, but we start out from the perspective that you may or may not have used Kubernetes before.
Okay.
Um, and
Okay.
honestly, that's out of necessity. It's similar if you were to take an AI class. You can take an advanced AI class, they're still going to have to start you with, they're still going to have to start you with a bunch of things that would be basics, but
Right.
those, you just get through them quickly, but
Yeah.
you're trying to, um, it's just because of where yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you'd want everybody to have the same environment, so everybody needs to be set up the same way. You don't want to have to deal with 30 different environments and 30 different questions and 30 different problems. So yeah,
well,
yeah,
and it's kind of like, I don't know, in some ways it's almost, like I said, I was gonna be a math professor. So, like from a teaching perspective, like it's like, okay, let's let's actually try to let's try to lay down a foundation that's stronger than the one that we might have had.
right,
So,
right,
like I've had people in the class, there are people in the class who who work in Kubernetes, like were giving, talks in Kubernetes or what have you, and um, and they still came out saying like, I learned, like that was really cool. I learned a bunch of stuff.
right.
And that's like a thing, like of course as an instructor, like you're like, oh God, I don't want to waste that person's time if they're, and in fact turns out we don't. So I've been um yeah, it's been a good class. At some point I need to like get some people's like reviews or whatever up on YouTube or something. I just
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
So we've had you on at least, if not every year, every other year. And one of the things when I was wanting to learn Kubernetes was I was going to buy a book. But then I realized the technology is moving so fast that that book was probably written 2 years ago and it's already out of date or, what have you. I was actually looking at, what's new with Kubernetes. They're up to version 1.33. Um, when you're, so this will go towards the methodology question I have as a follow up there, but it's like, um, you must have, there's new things that are added all the time, right? So, um, what is, like, what are some of the biggest things that you've seen in the last 6 months with Kubernetes that, you're like, oh, I need to implement that, or, hey, this would be great for the CTF, but I need to do this. And, what I actually posted up the change log here for what's new in Kubernetes, but I mean, what are some of the new things that you're like you've been excited about because you use it as a person, but you also create vulnerable content there. So what are some of the things in the last year 6 months that have been like, wow, this was a game changer, or this is wow, this makes it so much better?
yeah, I think the one of the ones that was pretty cool that I got surprised by when I was looking at what came out in the last few releases, was that you could, well, okay, I was gonna talk about like the kind of in place, vertical path scaling, but
Hmm.
uh that one's like not that exciting, but it's really helpful. It's the idea that you could say, okay, turns out this thing I've deployed in the cluster needs a lot more RAM, a lot more CPU. I'd like to like I'll have to redeploy the darn thing in order to give it more. Similar to like in public cloud, like shutting down a VM to give it to say,
Right.
now I'd like to add more cores or add more RAM. Um, so that's kind of a cool feature, being able to scale that way. The one that was the one that was really big, although it takes, something off of all of the security folks, including, like not like me, our great plate is, um, that Kubernetes now has user namespaces by default. So you could basically say that you'd like root in a container to not be root outside the container,
Ah,
in terms of
okay.
like what user it's running as, and and um, all the all the what's it called? Um, all the non-root users won't be mapped to the exact same UID numbers on the system. So you're not sitting there saying like, okay, well, if I have this container that's not running as root and and the process ends up having breakout or what have you, like,
Hmm.
like does this UID here actually maps to this thing on the file system? What does that mean? And so on. So it's kind of, that one was, so user namespaces, like literally anytime you were talking about like anytime you talk about Docker for the longest time, you'd be like, okay, so what happens when Docker stands up a container? Like it takes your program and it gives it a new PID namespace, so the list of
Right.
processes it sees. The programs in the container only see, the first process was the container and all of its children. Like, okay, and similarly, like in the container, there's a different host name. In the container, there's a different set of network card, like a different network namespace and routing tables, whether there's even a network card at all, besides local, besides loopback and so on. But the one that wasn't default in Docker and also wasn't default in Kubernetes was that user namespace,
Okay.
where where the set of user IDs you have um, in the container are like that's renamed space so that two different containers won't have the same user IDs. Um, so that one's kind of cool. I think I actually something I'd like to say though, in terms of the like, hey, I thought about picking up a book, but it all changes too fast. This was written 2 years ago. Um, Here's the cool, like in my mind, it's still worth picking up that book. Like book's 2 years old, okay, got it. There'll be new features. But
Right.
first, Kubernetes has been very, very backwards compatible because there's been a very like this was, like Google initially contributed Kubernetes as open source
Hmm.
um and a whole lot of people who work on it work for public cloud. And in public cloud, there's a very strong focus on not breaking the user experience,
That's a good
on not
point.
having
Yeah.
upgrades. Like so that's fairly well built in. Like Kubernetes doesn't do as many breaking changes as other technologies might. Um, but more critical than that is that um, a whole bunch of the concepts and ways you use it and APIs and so on, like don't change a ton. Like you're really, you're like, okay, I'm going to start out like saying, okay, what does Kubernetes do? Well, the smallest unit of work we're going to have in Kubernetes is a pod. Pod will have one or more containers, and the containers they'll be your container, and there'll be this other hidden container called a pause container. Like
Right.
that stuff hasn't changed, and so I think that's so I kind of that's part like I guess what I'm trying to say there is I guess partly as I said at the beginning, I love books. So I want to like so it's like, oh, please don't give up on books. And another is like is just try to I'm just trying to encourage everybody. Like um I think it's too easy for us to decide we're going to learn something and say, oh wait, no, the resources are probably out of date. Oh wait,
Right.
whatever. Like, no, like you can um those kind of obstacles aren't like they aren't they aren't massive roadblocks.
Oh, that's cool.
They're smaller things.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right. So
yeah.
that brings me to my next question here. So with all the new stuff that keeps getting added, obviously that there is new attack surface, or sometimes they deprecate some stuff. So there's attack surface that goes away. Um, uh, when you've created this, you're adding on to it. But what was your thoughts when you were making a CTF for Kubernetes? I mean, my thought is that you have to either, make settings that make it insecure, or you're adding things that, make it insecure. So you're either, adding or subtracting things that make it secure. My thinking is you're probably using an ancient version of Kubernetes because it makes it easier to be insecure. But do you have a specific methodology on how you go about analyzing the new stuff, the new features? You're like, oh, that's how I would have used that, or oh, this is, if I just add this setting, then I can do blah. And maybe does the Kubernetes developers look at your like your Bustakube, which we'll talk about in a second, but do they look at your CTF and they go, oh, okay, they found all these things, maybe we should fix those? Do you ever get any kind of feedback from your CTF about, oh, well, okay, we fixed that because this was so horribly broken?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think let's see. So for the most part, in almost all cases, what we're doing in the CTF is creating vulnerable configurations, often ones that are representative of what we found in pen tests.
Right.
Um, or we're creating vulnerable configurations, like we're creating some kind of loosening or vulnerability um, for people to find. You can one way of thinking about that is we're generally not trying to say, hey, is there some vuln that's going to get patched in Kubernetes that that you can hunt for?
Hmm.
In the same way, like, a Windows network pen test won't be focused so much on like, hey, are there any unpatched Windows systems out there? Like every now and then you get lucky, but
Right.
there'll be a lot more on like, okay, this Windows network had to, like this Windows network has to do a bunch of stuff. And in the course of making it do all that, there are some weaknesses or some trade-offs that have been made. How would you attack that? And in the same way with on the Kubernetes side, like we've done a little bit where it's there've been a couple cases where it's been a Kubernetes vuln. Um, the one that I'm most proud of is one that one of our co-organizers, Paquetto, made. Um, he had um, he had a 0 day that he'd found in Kubernetes, and I think he'd already reported it. Had already sent it in a bug bounty or what have you, and so it was still private. But he made that the last flag on the contest, and
Oh, nice.
so when like literally to get that flag, you had to discover O'Day that he discovered,
Right.
and a couple teams did.
Wow.
And but we also had to tell the teams like, hey, if you get this flag, we're asking you, please don't make this public. It's currently embargoed. Don't make this public because it's in this process. And I think the vulnerability came out like finally came out maybe 6 months or 8 months later. Like it took a long time for it to get through that bug bounty. But
Wow.
so he'd done a really that one was really cool. If I'm remembering correctly, um, there's a control you can set that says, hey, only run this container image. If the image defines some user to run as, that's not root.
Right.
And so apparently the check that was in the Kubernetes code was like checking for, like said the UID had to be, like probably had to be greater than zero. It had to be greater than zero to get through. And there's an integer overflow, so
Ah.
you could set the user ID, the UID on it to the last to the whatever it was to, I think it might have been 32,000 or so, but like whatever the right thing was, where it was 1 bit more, where it would overflow that size int and would end up being zero, but it would clear
Right.
the check because it was greater than that. Um,
Nice.
and so that was really cool. But mostly, like we're doing stuff that we found, like so many of the flags are come from things we found on pen tests.
Okay.
Um, we're definitely, I think the hardest ones this year will probably, maybe some ones we haven't found on pen tests because we're really trying to bring, um, we're doing a lot more flags than we normally do because we want there to be some flags at the beginning that a lot
Right.
of new people can get, and some flags at the end that will really allow the people, competing against each other to have something besides just sheer speed to compete on.
Okay.
To have the like, can you actually get this puzzle?
Right.
And I think that yeah, it's pretty neat.
Are
It's
Right on. So are all the flags specifically Kubernetes based, or is it going to be? I know you said you employ certain scenarios, certain movies. So is it like on Kubernetes we're running a banking website? There might be some OWASP related ones like your favorite IDOR right there, or there might
sure.
be, and then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, if I do this inside the web app, I can break out of the Kubernetes cluster. I don't know if that's a
No,
thing,
no, no. I
but
totally, yeah, yeah.
is it like those kinds of things where it's like, okay, because of poor code inside the application itself, you can actually break out and become, you can start playing with the rest of the cluster, or is it only Kubernetes related items?
No, it's a good question. So first, it's both. We just had a meeting earlier today where we were kind of talking about the different flags we were each developing. And like there's one flag that involves, AI prompt injection.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and and that will um so the idea though is that that'll be something that's running in a Kubernetes cluster or grants you access to the cluster. And there'll probably be something that's Kubernetes specific beyond that to get that flag.
Right, right.
But yeah, there's absolutely, I mean, like that's honestly been one of the keys, is that in the CTF, there'll be a whole bunch of things that are really a lot more that are vulnerabilities that are kind of enabled by the different kind of environment Kubernetes is.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, like one part of that is Kubernetes creates a ton more network connectivity than you'd have in a lot of environments. Like you
Okay.
might have more network segmentation if you weren't in a cluster. Whereas a Kubernetes cluster by default kind of starts out like standard with no network segmentation.
Hmm.
And so there can be some, fun stuff that comes out that way.
That's
But yeah, no, absolutely. There'll be a fair number of things that aren't like we're trying not to make any of them insane.
right.
Again, like our big focus is like we want people to play and we want
Right.
people who are in to keep playing and not get discouraged. So that's like a real big focus of the contest that way is kind of just like how do we keep people, how do we have like kind of maximal inclusion for the newbie?
Okay.
Um, so
That's cool. So how did so I I don't want to give too much away here because I don't know anything, but it's like how do you make keep the flags fresh? Because every year, I don't want to say that there isn't, a lot of attack surface here, but it's like how do you keep, from say, oh, I saw this one last year, same bug, I'll just go and look for this again or whatever. How do you keep the flags fresh? Is it outside of, the web app stuff? I mean, Kubernetes has certain classes of features, so they would make themselves, rife with potential security issues. So how do you keep those things fresh and keep them from being the same copy paste, flag as last year?
yeah, I mean, I think answer one is for me at least, like answer one for me personally is just you do more pen tests,
Ah,
so
okay.
that you're getting new ideas. I mean, it's crazy actually. One of the flags that I'm making is based on something that a student, that one of my students, I had a student in my training class who asked a question. I didn't know the answer to it. I was like, why don't we like I did what everybody what so many SANS instructors and other instructors have done before, like be like, well, that's out of left field. I'm not sure. Let's go find out.
Right.
And sometimes you're like, I don't have time to find out right now. Let me see if you don't find out before tomorrow morning, I'll find out by tomorrow morning.
Right.
And so one came out of like I did a training and so student had a really cool idea. I mean, he was totally a newbie, but he thought of something I totally didn't think of, tried it out. It's like, okay, you just found some very unexpected behavior. That's
Nice.
awesome.
Nice.
And so like, hey, student, can I use that with obviously with credit, but like, can I
Nice.
use that in the CTF? Um, yeah, and then the other way, honestly, you keep it fresh is you get more people to help create flags.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
because, like we all have stuff that we do time after time. And like, I don't know, so not to get into InGuardians, but like at InGuardians, a lot of our pen tests are two people instead of, whereas some companies will do everything with one.
Right.
Um, and it's because like honestly, you'll get stuff. From one person you get from another, and then you put two people together and they come up with ideas that neither one of them would come up with on their own.
Right. Right.
And so that like at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing is the team.
Okay.
So
Very good. Okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, I have the question here. So let's say I'm running Kubernetes in my workplace. What would be bare minimum Kubernetes security that would make your life awful if you were coming in there? Like, what is, what are some of the things that you come in and you're like, what is your XSS that every time you come in, you're like, okay, yes, all right, fine. I'm just going to copy paste that in because I know that that's a thing they do. Or, I've seen this at 15, I've seen this 15 times at 16 other, engagements or whatever. And it's like, it's same thing. So what is like one or two things that you always see with Kubernetes or with any kind of containerized kind of, because this is not your training is not just on Kubernetes, it's on clusters and containers of other types. So what are some of the one or two things that you always see on engagements like this?
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna try to type a few of these into Twitch, and then I'll copy them over to YouTube as well.
Okay.
So um, um, let's see. So
I'm checking out that blog you posted up there, Rory McCune's blog on Kubernetes or whatever.
yeah, I'm totally gonna plug that one too. It's
Yes,
the
please.
yeah, Rory writes and writes and writes, and I have so much respect for him. I have so much respect for like his kind of curiosity about stuff that leads him to write to, be like, I was wondering about such and such, so I dug into it, and here's what I found.
Nice.
Um, and um, and he's just, I feel like he's really helpful to people, whether they're beginners or advanced folks. Um, so so thing after, time after time, like what are some of the biggies on pen tests we find or we end up giving people advice around? Um, uh, they're kind of like two big ones in particular. Um, so that first one's kind of the what's called RBAC, or role-based author access control. It's
Mm-hmm.
like basically the authorization system that says who's allowed to ask the API to do what. Like who's allowed to say I'd like to create a pod, or I'd like to get a, or I'd like to list out all the secrets that are in the cluster and get their contents. Like who's allowed to do to create, change, delete, list, inspect objects. Um, and on most pen tests, you end up with like just one or two, at least, like places where you're like, oh wow, that user or that component has way too much privilege. Um, and one of the other kind of big fundamentals that honestly orgs seem to have a lot of trouble getting all the way is admission control. And admission control is a funky name. Um, so I'm going to oversimplify and say, like, basically what it does is says, for anything that anybody does create, they were allowed to create a pod, if they were allowed to create if they were allowed to do one of these things with the API, can we create more qualitative rules about that? Like
Right.
what kind of, like, oh, you're allowed to create a service. We're not going to let you create this kind of service because that lets you get a monkey in the middle. Um, you're allowed to create a pod. Cool, you can create a pod, but we're not going to let you create pods that have privileged containers and use, or that strip away some of the namespace, the use of some of the namespaces, or share the host namespace and let you
Mm-hmm.
kind of break out. Um, so admission control lets you do that. And honestly, I keep finding cases where clients have some good admission control rules set up, but they're all set in alerting only mode. Um, so I think those are two of the biggies that just come up time after time. Um, to a lesser extent, network segmentation comes up, and like egress controls and so on.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think trying to think of what else of kind of like the other part. I think the biggest thing that'll distinguish, or one of the bigger things that'll distinguish one pen test from another is, oh, what's this cluster for? Or what are these clusters for? Like,
Right.
are they, you know, like the how yeah, how massively wide is the set of people who are out to use them, and like how mature, like how much of it are you saying like, okay, these clusters are actually, we don't let users create anything without it going through our CI/CD pipeline,
Right.
whereupon it gets like reviewed by our platform team, and we have a whole process and so on. So it's kind of like ends up being um, but yeah, on the like most organizations don't have that kind of maturity or discipline yet around their clusters, and partly it's
Mm.
because you're trying to keep things really useful. But RBAC and mission control seem to be the two of the ones that keep coming up over and over again.
Nice.
Um,
When you go in and
yeah.
you do engagements like this with heavily Kubernetes or containerized stuff, who tends to get what you're talking about, like RBAC and, those things? Is it the developers, the people who run the CI/CD pipeline, or is it the security people, or do you find that maybe the security people aren't completely understanding? I'm not saying it's a new technology, but it's like oh, you're dealing with, they're dealing with other stuff, so maybe they're not equipped necessarily to be Kubernetes security experts. Who do you find when you're briefing these findings on that they get it? Is it the security people, or is it the
Yeah,
developers, or both? Maybe there are more people with Kubernetes knowledge, security wise.
it varies massively from company to company.
Right.
Just so massively. I think what I'll say is it is a challenge for a lot of companies in that um, Kubernetes may not be new at this point. It's about 10 years old. So I'm getting the year right. Um, but the adoption has been like is still this kind of exponential curve.
Right.
And that means that, especially in information security, there aren't as many of us that are as familiar. So I think everybody, like anybody we're talking to about what we're finding, is generally
Sure.
tends to be eager for the results, and they're eager to learn. And honestly, I think that in this area, you're always doing a certain amount of like teaching.
Right.
Um,
Right.
um, the and in terms of like the teams, I'd say the developers often will. I don't know if the developers understand a lot because I only get to talk to developers so much, and that's solely because there's so freaking many of them. Like companies that are running Kubernetes very often have a very, very, very high developer count,
Right.
and so you're not getting to talk to any kind of representative set of the developers necessarily. The platform teams have been great. Like they understand what they're building. They still haven't often, you know, looked at it from that attacker mindset
Right.
because, well, that's our whole field. Doesn't matter whether the technology is super old. The people who are running it are running it, and security's part of their job, but not the primary focus.
Right.
Um, the so the platform teams tend to be, kind of have the most understanding ahead of time. Um, but everybody tends to be, I don't know, everybody tends to find it useful and to be pretty welcoming. I don't know that
Mm.
it's kind of great. Like I haven't had too many tests where people are, like as a pen tester, as an outside consultant, occasionally you'll have a client where you've got some people who really don't like that there's a pen test going on.
Right.
And the underlying part is I think the underlying part of that is they think they're supposed to be perfect. They think the things they built are supposed to be perfect, and so they're scared, and so that makes them aggressive. But I think the nice thing with Kubernetes is nobody expects, like very few companies expect all the people who are around the clusters, who are around Kubernetes to be SMEs, and be perfect. And so I think there's been more room. Um, I don't know, for one reason or another, just haven't had that kind of like, oh gosh, this person wishes we weren't being tested or whatever, like is scared of, whatever. So
Right. I
that's been
was
my,
thinking more along the lines of, maybe a security person that, isn't aware that it wasn't their decision to implement Kubernetes, was the site
oh,
reliable
sure.
engineers or something like that. And it's like, I don't really understand the technology. The SREs are over there dealing with it,
Yeah,
the head of
I get
engineering was
it.
a huge Kubernetes fan. And so we're here to make sure that it's not doing, poorly. We don't really understand it all that much, but we want to learn and that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
my
So
bad.
no, no, no.
I didn't
I
understand.
was just
I
thinking
didn't
of,
think through the question well
yours
enough
is a
there.
legitimate way too, but I was thinking along the lines of maybe,
Yeah,
security's like, yeah, let's implement this thing or let's not implement this thing, but
I think security in a lot of ways is last on the understanding or on the tooling. And honestly, part of that is like, like you're talking to the security folks and they have a whole lot of different things they're responsible for, and they may or may not have been allowed to touch any of them.
right,
And so like it's harder for them to even um, yeah, so they're in a rough place. The people who I think are in the roughest place at the moment are I think are the blue teams are basically kind of the defenders who are, who are supposed to respond to incidents or respond to
right.
attacks
Yep. Oh
because,
yeah.
you know, you're looking at an alert and you're like, what does this alert mean? Is this alert something I should be worried about? How worried about it should I be? And I think
Right.
the state of the art right now in terms of getting from an alert that came out of a security tool into a, I know what to do with this. I know whether it's, hell, even severities, like severities on some alerts out of tools are still set, or likely set really low. And you're like, why? And like, well, it made a lot of noise because there's some valid stuff in the cluster that needed, they needed to run that way. And you're like, yeah, but that's something I as an attacker am going to do. Yeah, so it's a like honestly, that's one of the things I started working a bunch more with detection folks to try to help them, like during a pen test,
Right.
saying like, okay, let me show you these different steps in our attack path, and like let's look at the logs, let's look at the alerts, and potentially build rules for their SIMs so that the alerts that are coming out of tools actually result in you know SIM alerts and actionable playbooks.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so
No,
like I
that
think that's early days.
yeah, that was kind of my next question. It's like, defenders or people who are looking for infections or something like that. You can't drop an EDR on a Kubernetes, pod or something. It just doesn't work like that. And or maybe it does. I don't know. But it's like, where do you put, where do you tap into the communications, or where do you tap into that? Logs are obviously great, but it's like, do the logs make sense for what you're looking for? Is it an infection? I don't know. I mean, look at the logs. Well, I'm getting, PC load letter. What the hell does that mean? That kind of thing. Or, am I, where do I put the Wireshark to analyze the traffic? Where do I put it, the tap in on this? Do I put it between the pods? Do I put it, between
Yeah,
the control platform? Do I put it at the basic in and out, part of the cluster? And you can see my ignorance here, as you can tell. But it's like, you know, that would be huge for the defenders, because they get a leg up on how they can more easily monitor that stuff instead of dealing with a lot of noise there. So
yeah, yeah. And I think there's some really good tooling out, but I think that it's still like I think in a lot of ways we're still in that place that we were in, a long, long time ago with IDS or IPS or
mm,
what have you, where
right.
where it's like, okay, I see a ton of alerts, I don't know what to do with them. I don't know, like we had to turn that off because it was too noisy or what
Right.
have you, like
Right.
kind of getting there. Um, but yeah, it's a it's a hard problem.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's a difficult issue for like GRC folks, where you're expecting certain things because, like, well, we run all of our stuff in Kubernetes, and it's, we have to figure out how PCI controls are able to be implemented on these things in such a way, or the SOC audit is coming through, or you've got ISO standards that you've got to follow, and it's like, well, Kubernetes doesn't do that. You're going to have to do this to be able to do that thing, or whatever. So, um, um, but yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because there's been some really good tooling in terms of trying to like at least to hit regulatory requirements and all that. Like, but it's
Okay.
still so I think in some ways the governance folks may have it a little bit easier in some ways. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like one part in Kubernetes that's nice is like to expose like a program that's running in a cluster
Right.
to the internet actually takes like you have to create an object to do that. And because you have to create an object, first, it doesn't happen accidentally that much. And
Right.
second, you can list those objects anytime you want. So it's kind of like certain parts of that job get easier, either because you say, okay, well, CRUD, we need a tool for that. And so there actually are some
Nice.
mature tools, and other places where you're like, wow, okay, this is kind of cool. It's a little less Wild West because we can use APIs to enumerate the things that we're looking for to enumerate attack surface and so on.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's
Very nice.
yeah,
I want to shift gears because you've added some things here that I'm kind of interested in talking about, being the you called ADHD fun. I'm as somebody who at age 45 was diagnosed with ADHD and kind of knew about, maybe he was a bit off for the last 20 years. Um, it was a revelation for me to actually be, I would say, formally diagnosed with ADHD. Can you talk about the fun of ADHD? Because
yeah,
my experience with ADHD was, I realized that I was getting stressed out about my job, and my doctor, when I was talking to her, she said, you've been living on serotonin and adrenaline for the last 40 years, and you finally realize that that's not going to get you. If you want to move up in your career, you're going to come to a point in your career where serotonin and adrenaline are not going to work for you, because you push off things until the last minute, and then it's like, oh, gotta get it done, gotta get it done. And then it's like, oh, so and then sometimes squirrel, obviously, oh, squirrel, that kind of thing, and I get distracted.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And I want to, I was initially hesitant to take the Ritalin generic that was going on. Um,
sure.
but it's amazing how little 5 milligrams of a little tablet will change your perspective on life in that respect. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on your experiences with ADHD as well.
Sure, sure. I think so I remember when I got a diagnosis, which was also later in life,
Oh,
you know,
really? Oh, okay.
not during high school or
Right.
college,
Right.
or even, that soon after that. Um, and yeah, so when I made a note that like it could be fun to talk about ADHD, I think it's fun to talk about. I'm not necessarily going to say it's fun to have.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's not, it's really, it's kind of a complex thing. But one of the reasons I think it's fun to talk about is there are lots of folks that, don't know if they have it, don't know if they want to find out if they have it, like they're scared of what everyone will think if they realize they have it.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways, kind of the more that we talk about it, the more you realize that you're not alone, that there are a lot of us out there. Um, there are a lot of folks out there with all kinds of non-typical, um, with all kinds of non-typical brains. So,
Mm.
on the ADHD front, for me, um, yeah, I got a diagnosis at a certain point, and I was like, and it was at first it was really scary. It was really hard. It was
Mm.
like literally had this thought like, oh God, I'm broken.
Yeah.
Like it was just,
Oh, yeah.
and like uh and that was yeah, I mean, I remember finding it difficult at first when I got the diagnosis. I remember taking some meds. I remember taking meds, and my first experience with the medication was, okay, taking the medication is making it easier for me to for me to learn and practice a bunch of different skills that I don't have, that I've never practiced, like
Right.
literally just like all kinds of like here's the simplest, easiest one to talk about. Um, and it's the like, okay, you've got to leave the house by whatever. You got to leave the house by noon or something, right?
Ah, yeah.
You're like, okay. So often, what happens? Well, at 11:55, you go looking for your shoes and your watch and all that, and you leave your house at about 11:15, about 12:15, when you need to leave at noon. And now, the person that you were meeting is mad or whatever, and or whatever. And so like literally I took medication, I started reading books because again, love books. I went to a support group meetings a few times, started working with the coach,
Hmm.
and, and like one of the first ones was like, oh, hey, okay, so here's something that that I guess normies must do in their head without realizing they're doing it or something. But like, gotta leave your house at noon. What are all the things you have to do before you can leave your house? Um, okay, well, how long do they take? I don't know, they'll take like 5 minutes. Okay, for a little while, start writing down, get out your watch, write down the start and the end of how long it took you to do the 5 minute thing. Oh, was it 18? Okay. You do that for a little while, and eventually you start to build a more realistic idea of how much time things take.
Right.
Um, and you're still working, like I'm just talking about weaknesses in ADHD, not the strengths for a moment, but you're still working with um I'm trying to find the right word. You're still working with a challenge in that, your brain maybe just doesn't estimate time very well.
Right.
But the cool thing for me is like once you realize, oh, my brain doesn't estimate time very well,
Mm.
that means there's this thing to do that's hard that I didn't realize was hard or was supposed to be hard or whatever. Like it's this thing. And you actually do end up getting better at it. But the first massive improvement comes just from like starting just from saying, oh, I think I'm not good at estimating time. Let me
Right.
try to let me try to do some of the stuff that seems embarrassing to do, but I'll do them.
Mm.
Um, and I used to be really self-conscious about some of this stuff, some of the stuff I'm going to describe. Like when I first got the diagnosis, uh, I had one of the very classic behaviors. I'd interrupt everybody all the time, like out of this fear that I was going to forget the thought, right? And now I actually can spot other ADHDers often because I see that they're interrupting me before they forget what they were going to say.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, cool, my people. Rock, I
Mhm.
understand that. Like, I'm not offended. Like, I get it. But so for me, like when I first got the diagnosis, I'm like, okay, I started keeping like a note, what's it called? An index card wallet in my
Oh,
pocket.
okay.
And like I'd be sitting in a meeting with 6 or 7 people, and I would just pull in index cards, writing down the thought, putting them on the table so that I wouldn't interrupt anybody because I knew that I wasn't going to forget the thought. I'd written it down right here. And hell, like I also started writing down in index cards because it meant my boredom wouldn't lead to me zoning out or not paying attention or whatever. I gave
Right.
myself something to do. What I have to do is write stuff down.
Right.
Cool. Like, so honestly, to this day, I take notes in meetings that I'm, never necessarily going to have to read, but I'm taking the notes so that I'll pay attention. Just as a thing to keep my brain in. Like I'm trying to hack my brain. Like that's the
Yep.
so on the ADHD side, crazy thing is you get the diagnosis and all of a sudden you realize that all your friends are too.
Right.
Or not all, but almost all your friends are too. And you're like, oh,
Yep.
wait, we tend to seek each other out. Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
and
like noticing you like ice cream and you realize, oh, or you bought you're looking for a blue car and then all of a sudden there's a ton of blue cars or something like
Blue
that.
cars
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's also to some extent we start selecting each other. And
Yep.
the
Yep.
negative part of me says we select each other because we'll tolerate each other. We'll tolerate these ADHD behaviors or whatever. But I think it's more than that. And partly I think it's more than that because it does have upsides. Like I said, I talk about the deficits, but I think that that the ADHD, attention activity deficit, whoa, am I gonna get this wrong? AD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
The disorder part um, is already a little cruel
Mm.
because there are a whole lot of us out there.
Right.
And so it's like, maybe this is just a different way of being. Like every now and then I do what every ADHDer does. I screw something up. Like I end up like I end up coming in late to a meeting, 7 minutes late to a meeting. I'm like, oh my God. And I know I've pissed everybody off, right? Like they
Right.
feel like I've wasted their time and like I didn't think it was important. And that's not what it is. But like sometimes when that happens, I'll go into a shame spiral.
Mm.
And at one point I was in one of those shame spirals just as I was meeting my psychiatrist. And I told him what I was feeling. And he's like, hey, listen, remember that these ways of being, some of the ADHD ways of being, they were adaptive at a time. Like they were useful, and there are still jobs that go looking like there's still professions where they recruit ADHDers um, because the fact that our attention is simultaneously very diffuse and then locked in and then diffuse and then locked in
Right.
can be really advantageous for some things.
Yep.
Like, and there are certainly strengths. Like you figured out, like you may put something off the last minute, but then you're shocked that like I don't not going to say you were shocked, but the amount that you produce in that smaller amount of time is pretty incredible. That hyperfocus is really strong. You can't live in it all the time.
Right.
So there's downside, but the hyperfocus can be incredibly useful sometimes for learning new things or for creating something or for whatever.
Right.
Um, and there's also like another strength in ADHD is there's also a lot of creativity that happens. Like if your attention is diffuse, if your thoughts jump from here to there, there to there to there to there,
Right.
um, then you start forming connections between things that seem unrelated. Like I've got a friend who specifically goes off his medication on days when he wants creativity. Um,
Ah, okay.
and he'll, I'm not advocating that anyone take medication, not take medication, go on or off it. That I'm not a doctor, please.
Right.
Um, but but it's interesting. It's kind of like because and I'll say when I first got medicated, my dosage was very high, and so I ended up deciding not to be on meds at all for a while because I
Hmm.
didn't like some of the side effect of it being that high. But later on, I realized it was just too high. It was the wrong one of the two major stimulant drugs that were at the time.
Right.
Um, but the but anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. So a long time ago, when I first got on it, my dosage was super high, and it was really strange for me because I remember I taken me like, wait, because my attention isn't hopping from thing to thing, I don't know when to stop thinking about a thing. Like crud, I literally gonna have to I'm gonna have to figure out how to like put the brakes on now. Like this is so
Yep.
I don't know, like on the so I think partly what I want to say to people with ADHD is first, there are a ton of us. So go talk to some others because that's always the helpful thing, or that's often the helpful thing.
Yeah.
Um, the other is most of the time what I believe is we're not broken. The deficit or the disorder in there is hopefully a misnomer and it's just a different way of being. And then the third one is like, okay, if there are some places that being this type of brain um, means you are weaker, um, the the first and honestly most powerful step is just acknowledging it, understanding it, keeping it in mind, so that you can then figure out how do you deal with that? Like what is that, like what what different habits do you make, whatever. Like the first couple of years I got a diagnosis, I used to have a notebook called JOS. My name's Jay, so
Right.
it's three letters. But JOS was kind of my like, these are the habits that I'm currently trying to keep in play to help me
Right.
compensate. And
Right.
the reason it had to be written down and called JOS was because otherwise I was going to forget it, right? Or otherwise, like that same kind of like um uh impulsivity to like, oh, let me try something else. Oh, let me try something else. Oh, let me try something else. Like I was just trying to get myself like that was another one of mine that I still try to keep in mind is like, okay, when I decide on a new way of taking notes or a new way of managing my calendar or managing my to-do list or whatever,
Yep.
don't switch to something else for at least choose a time. In my case, like 1 week or two
Oh,
weeks,
nice. Yeah.
like because your brain wants to, like show me an ADHD or I'll show you someone who's had 5 different note-taking systems in the last 2 years,
Oh, yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
And to some extent, like there's a certain amount just be acceptance. Like, yes, that is how our brains work. And it like some part of that's adaptive and because the shame spiral is the like in my experience, the shame spiral is sometimes the crippling thing
Yep.
because it's like you go into this feeling of powerlessness or whatever, and uh you can't do anything for anybody when you're in that spot.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so
I,
I don't
I,
know.
I have
Yeah.
this kind of the I'm kind of the opposite with you. You mentioned you're always, you're always on late. I don't know if it's the Navy for me, but I am a chronic earlier person. I,
Oh
I
yeah.
I have to, it's like I know that it's going to take me exactly 25 minutes to get to a place. So I'm there 25 minutes before it actually gets, so I'm wasting all that time or whatever. Oh, no, oh, by the way, CFC 121, shout out to you. And because they asked for it. I cannot take notes for shit because my brain moves faster than my word per minute. And so it's
Sure.
like, yeah, I try to summarize those things, but yeah, taking notes for me is nigh impossible. Um, about the only method I've actually seen that works for me so far is I use VS Code as best I can. because it's really the only one that I found that kind of is, well, it's interoperable between all the operating systems, but I can save them as text or markdown or whatever. But yeah, to your point, yeah, I know that there are people who are, late because they do things, but it's like for me, it's like I am a chronic worrier about, well, what if there's traffic? What if I can't find my shoes? What if what I wrote is complete garbage? And because of where I work, writing is kind of a thing that they do. So it's
Yeah.
like I've had to train myself to go, I'm going to write this knowing that somebody's going to tell me it's crap and I'm going to have to rewrite it anyway, because I would spend 8 hours on a document and then I would end up spending another 8 hours on that document. Is it good enough? Oh, should I change this wording or whatever?
Perfectionism. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that it's not good enough, which is why I spend 8 hours on it. And then I stress out because it's not going to be good enough. And I finally actually had to, like to you, I've had coping mechanisms where I'm like, I'm going to spend 2 hours on this doc. I know that it's probably 70% of the way there, but I know that somebody's going to tear it up anyway. I could spend 8 hours on it and they're going to tear it up, or I could spend 2 hours on it and they're going to tear it up. So
Nice.
it's like I get the thoughts out there and then I go, here, boss, here it is. And oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay, half a dozen things, whatever. It's like, okay, cool. I can work on those half a dozen things. So I'm not wasting
Yeah.
6 hours of worrying and spiraling and is this good enough? Or oh, this sucks, because
Yeah.
I think it sucks instead of them thinking it sucks. But yeah, I am a chronic worrier. My daughter actually, she has to be on the spectrum because I'm on the spectrum. I feel it. My cousins, my nephews, or one has actually had to be pulled out of school and has gone to a special school for folks that deal with ADHD in that respect, and he's thriving there, which is great to hear. But
Nice.
I've told my daughter, I was like, we can get you tested if you want to get tested, and she's like, no, 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 I'm cool with it. And I was like, I didn't have that opportunity. I lived in middle America and it was like all them kids in California, they're on the Ritalin and, whatever's and whatever. I should have been on that Ritalin as probably a 9 or 10-year-old child because I was a hellion. The Navy actually gave me those guardrails, which was helpful, gave me that structure that I needed. But a lot of it, yeah, I was like 45 and I'm reading these memes on Twitter about, oh, ADHD memes or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's me. Oh, wait, that's me too. Oh, haha. No, wait, that one's me too. Crap. And
I had a few friends who sought out who sought out diagnosis because of ADHD memes they'd seen, and it's really cool.
yeah, yeah, there was definitely a stigma there of being going in to
Yeah.
even do this thing. It's like, yeah, am I
Yeah.
broken? Right? Is there something wrong with me? And I think it really amplified during the pandemic when everybody was at home. I got into a
Yeah.
real workout gig, and you're an avid runner, I would imagine, and you fill out a t-shirt real nicely. So I'm not saying you just yeah. Um, but I realized that things like exercise was helpful. I go on walks. I have a walk during the morning. I have a walk at lunch. I block my 12 to noon or 1 to 12 to 1 to go take a walk and to disengage from work to kind
Nice.
of, let that go.
I
And I
should
take
do
an
that.
evening walk as well. I'm sitting at 7,100 steps today, which is a little low for me, but I find that exercise is somewhat helpful. And the biggest issue I have right now is remembering to take the meds, which is another ADHD thing I heard. So uh,
Okay, two things then. First, alarms.
alarms, right, right,
So
right.
I was talking earlier about how I was really embarrassed at first at all the things that I do to compensate. And eventually I did what I think often starts to come naturally as you get a little bit older, is like you start to be like, okay, maybe nobody cares whether I am a little weird or whatever. So like
Right.
for me, like um way before Siri, like I'd pull up my phone and I'd say, I'd pull down the button or whatever you
Oh,
really should do and say, like, remind in 20 minutes, remind me to, such and such.
right, right.
And so when as a consultant, I'd be on site, and so I wouldn't want to do that because I don't want to look weird. Eventually, I was like, screw it, I'm gonna look weird. I'll just, and then I'd see other people like who had doing it done in front of the people I was worried were gonna think I was weird, and they were doing that now. And they're like, yeah, I saw you do that. I thought it was a good idea. I was like, oh, I'm being way too self-conscious about the accommodations I make, like, and making them less effective because I'm, afraid to be seen, using these things. Um, uh, So alarms. And the cool thing, I've definitely found a ton of ADHDers who are like way more effective than me in their lives, and I'll tell them I have a lot of alarms, and they'll show me their phone where there's like they'll just scroll, like scrolling. Like
Nice.
I don't cook anything on the stove without setting an alarm for how many minutes it might be when it would start to burn.
Ah, yes.
Because if I don't, 1 out of 4 times, I'm gonna overcook something. So screw
Right.
it. I'm just gonna
Right.
set a darn alarm, and I'm gonna like that part in my brain that says they don't need to put an alarm in for something, or only put it on my calendar that I'll
Right.
remember it. I just like push that to the side and say, wait, not gonna like um I'm gonna use systems, or I'm gonna use something.
Right.
And the other thing I felt really embarrassed because I wanted to say I had that chronic lateness problem. I don't tend to anymore, but it's because I also do the same thing. I overshoot. So first, like I'll sit down, somebody will ask me to commit to something, and I'm so embarrassed of it, but I'll pull out a piece of paper and I will write down, like, okay, they're asking me to commit to doing such and such at noon. What do I have to do? What are each of the things I have to do before that to get to be ready to do that at noon, to like fulfill that obligation, to fulfill that commitment?
Right.
And I'll write it all down, and I'll refuse to give an answer for the extra minute it takes me, or 30 seconds or 45 seconds it takes me to write those things down, because like um with my ADHD's memory, like I was just really worried about following through on commitments.
Yep. Yep.
Um and so I'm like, okay, no, I'm not going to, but that means I'm going to have to truly put in a little bit of extra effort to figure out what does it take to make that to fill on it. And so also, like, I don't tend to be late for things. I
Mm.
tend to be early. Like I made a big about face, like before and after. I used to get to the airport like 30 minutes before the flight. I knew how long it took to run from this part of the airport to this part. I was often running. Now I'm like, screw it. I get to the airport 2 hours, more than
Oh,
two
yeah.
hours early,
Yeah.
and I'm shocked. There's a lot more. Uh, it's still not as much time as I thought it was,
Right.
but it's also I'm never going to be wasting my time because I have a laptop and a book and a phone. Like
Exactly.
I will absolutely make productive use of that time. I'm just going to do it from an airport instead of my house.
Exactly. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
that's like it's the but yeah, I think the other thing that you kind of have shared here is anxiety.
Mm. Oh,
And
yeah.
ADHD has a lot of what they call comorbidities. It's an awful word. But yeah, folks with ADHD, we often tend to have anxiety or depression. Um, I'm on the anxiety side, which certainly makes sense with my hyperactivity. Um,
Yep.
but and for both anxiety and depression, exercise, especially cardio, is amazing. And yeah, all the way. Like I think the other thing you said that I think also weighs in here is 2020. 2020 was a rough year, right? The
Oh,
pandemic,
yeah.
the lockdown. I remember that point. I remember like literally all of my ADHD symptoms for me like seemed to double
Mm.
immediately in whatever it
Yep.
was, April of 2020.
Yep.
And like part of it was that the anxiety kind of feeds in. Um, and part of it I think was, yeah, I definitely got a lot less active. I don't even go running outside. I was scared of the like we're all, at that point, we're all still trying to figure out like, can you run nearby people? Will you be safe? Like what
Right.
was, so it was but yeah, I think um, I think this is a place where, my partner is amazing because, you know, um, she'll ask me like, um, you know, have you gotten a chance to exercise today? Have you gotten any cardio today? Do you want to like go for a walk or whatever? And be like, oh yeah, I haven't. And that it helps massively. It helps anxiety. It honestly helps ADHD symptoms. Like the one thing I wish I could do is get myself to run first thing in the morning.
Mm.
Um, and I can't seem to because I'm on the West Coast and have lots of East Coast clients and some time zones.
Yeah.
But but yeah, no, it's like that would I think be one of the most useful things to everybody. Just tell them like, and you don't have to run. Like walk is huge.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you know, yeah, it's yeah. So
Yeah. That's when I started listening to audiobooks. because I listen to audiobooks when I'm walking. So, right now I'm listening. I was listening to the Expanse novels. There was a time where I was listening to nothing but security podcasts when I was walking too, and then I was like, I really need to get away from security. So this is an
Sure.
hour or 45 minutes a day where I can go and do something that isn't security related because, I do a podcast, I'm working security. It's like, do I need to listen to friggin' security as well? It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen to The Expanse, or I'm gonna listen to, something else. And so, I listen to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, or, the Joy podcast with Craig Ferguson, or, I've got other things that I listen to that will keep me sane, and it allows me to decompress. And sometimes I'll even think about a problem at work, but it'll be like, oh, okay, I can do that on my own terms, and
Nice.
maybe I'll come up with an alternative solution or something when I'm working through that issue. So,
Certainly.
but it's good to set boundaries. Like it's avant-garde where I work at to just block your lunch off. Otherwise you'll get meetings through lunch, and I'm like, look, I take my
Well, yeah.
lunch. I'm you know I
Good
take my
idea.
lunch. I'm not at my desk. I take my lunch, and sometimes I'll heat up something and come back and eat while I'm working after lunch. After the 12 to noon. But it's those are coping mechanisms because of where I work is very high stress, and there's a lot of shit
Yeah.
going on, and it's like I don't I need to have that buffer. I need to have that. So like Tuesdays and Fridays, I go to the gym before I go to work. I do that because I have to.
Yeah.
And I'm not as, I'm not superhero like you are, but I get there.
I think
Um,
I'm really, I mean, I think I'm learning a bunch. I think I'm learning a bunch here today. Like one of those is like, I really have been the opposite for lunch. Like
oh,
I've worked through lunch for the longest time, and I don't know why. I think like part of it's just, don't want to be bored, want to, blah, 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 right? It's the
right,
like, it's ADHD probably it's that way. But and I think it would be smarter. Like there's a lot, it's, I've not only learned the whole thing, like if you don't take a vacation
right,
now
right.
and then, you
Yep.
start to get like, you realize once you finally do take the vacation, like, man, I would have been a lot more effective if I just went and took the vacation, like, because you come back, I don't know, they call it like sharpening the axe or whatever, like you come back more capable
Oh yeah.
because you need the break. And
Yep.
so I really should do like you and take the darn lunch and make that the, because it's not like I'm negotiating with other people around that. Like
Yeah.
it's not that anybody's overtly pressuring me to not to work through lunch.
Yeah.
It's just become a bad habit.
Right. Well,
Um,
my thing is there's always going to be work to do. If you're, even if you only take an hour out of your day, there's still going to
yeah,
be those 7 things. And if you fix those 7 things in that hour, there'd still be 15 more things that you have to do. There's always going to be work to do. That's
yeah.
the same thing I tell people. I used to laugh at work-life balance, and I tell the people that I work with, my bounty team folks, I come into work the next morning and somebody has been slacking at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, go home, go
Yeah,
home, turn off your shit. Don't be on. And or somebody be like,
yeah,
hey, can I huddle with you for a minute? And I'm like, it's 4:30 your time in New York. What are you doing on a meeting? I was like, go home. And
yeah,
on a Friday, and I'm like, go home. And she was like, ha
yeah,
ha ha. And I was like, I'm just doing this. I'm like, no, no, no. You should be on a train. You should be heading home.
yeah,
And I have to, I'm only a TPM, but I feel like I can't have them burnt out. I can't have them working 60, 50, 60 hours a week, because I would be working those same 50, 60 hours a week, and that wouldn't do good for me either. So I want to make sure that they're not dealing with burnout. They're not dealing with, they should have a family life. They should have a work-life balance. And, don't contact me unless the place is burning down. You should also not
yeah.
be on a Slack, or you should not be trying to do work at, I don't want to see CRs at 10 o'clock at night. I don't want to see CRs at midnight or whatever. There's always time to do that during work hours. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe that's anathema to the place I work at, but that's I think we're gonna have we're gonna have a happier workforce doing so. But anyway,
I mean, there's a lot of productivity to be gained too by just being, by doing that. Like it's
sure,
just kind of right.
you got to step
I
away.
mean,
Yeah.
you are at one of the toughest places of all, I think, to be at
Mm,
least for knowledge workers.
mm,
Um, in terms of the pressure,
yeah.
I think. So I don't
Yeah.
want to, yeah, I don't want to in any way take away from that. I think
Yeah.
that it's, no, I think this is really, I think it's useful for me and probably for a bunch of other people to hear.
Besides, you're the
So
boss. If you said, "Hey, I'm going to go take lunch," what are your folks going to say? No, don't go. You can't take lunch. You'd be like,
I,
you know,
like I said, it's not external. It's like, it's crazy. Like most of us, like whatever our work ethic is or whatever, like, um, I think a bunch of my own stuff to get over or work my way through, is like work ethic where I want to be making sure that I'm doing enough and so on
right,
is, comes from stuff I learned in an office at 14 years of age. And I'm, still internalizing, right? Like nobody's still here. Nobody's asking me to do that.
right,
Um, and I think, in a lot of places, the it's not so overt that anybody's asking you. And I think that what you're doing with the people around you is like, it's like culture is built um, in all directions at once. And
right.
so like, who's to say what the culture is,
Yeah,
um, like you impact it. So
I appreciate that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Jay, I love you, man. I'm glad you were able to join me today. And yeah, I hope everybody who might have been on the fence for the Black Hat training or are going to DEF CON will get on the CTF and sign up. You can go to containersecurityctf.com. The Black Hat training is still available. I don't think it's sold out yet, which is great. And yeah, if you know what, I'll just put it out here. If you've got pen test needs, hit up InGuardians. They'll do you right. You know what I mean? So um, cool. And if people wanted to contact you, Jay, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's a good question. LinkedIn's great. I'm on all the social medias. Um, but I'm only so good at paying attention to most of them um actively. Like I'll look at most of them only every few days. But yeah, I'll put on, by the way, a note earlier you were talking about Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, VS
Take a look at
Code.
Obsidian. It
Yep.
lets you
Oh yeah.
do, text and markup.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so yeah, and I'll put a couple of the other what's it called? I'll put a couple of the other handles in the Twitch.
Awesome. Yeah, I put your LinkedIn profile in chats. So yeah.
Awesome.
Right on. Well, I hope to see you at DEF CON. I won't be there at Black Hat, and I have a potential work event that I've got to do while Black Hat and DEF CON are kind of going on. But I'll be there as a goon, and I will find you. I will find you on the vendor floor there in the hard asphalt in the floor lighting area, and we'll uh,
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
nice friendly hug. So
Awesome. I
right
can't
on.
wait to see you.
All right, sir.
Okay.
You have a great day. Thank you.
You
And
too.
yeah, that was it for Breakdown Security. I'll see y'all on Friday. We'll
Cool.
do some boot.dev and we'll continue learning how to build asteroids with Python. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we'll talk soon. All right. Bye, everybody.